Hi, I'm Alex Newman, foreign correspondent with The New American, and today I want to talk to you about Luis Moreno Ocampo. He was the first and the last, or the most recent, I should say, other than the current one, chief prosecutor for the UN's International Criminal Kangaroo Court. It's actually called the International Criminal Court, but it is a kangaroo court in the truest sense of the term. And now we have mountains of evidence proving that its chief prosecutor was a kangaroo prosecutor. It's a series of leaks now called the Court Secrets is what it's going as. Huge trove of documents, tens of thousands of documents surrounding this Ocampo character, Argentinian lawyer who, ironically enough, and you'll understand why it's so ironic in a minute, ironically enough was the Latin American chief of Transparency International, which fights to abolish financial privacy and abolish your rights to privacy in banking and business and all the rest of it. And so where to start with this guy? Well, we'll start maybe with his shady deals. Right. So one of his illustrious clients was a Libyan billionaire, oil magnate, media magnate who's backing one of the militia factions fighting for control of the ruins of Libya after Obama and the UN bombed Libya to smithereens and destroyed it. Turns out his favorite militia is well known for human rights abuses, mass executions, murdering prisoners, other atrocities. And it turns out that some of the leading officers of this militia go on Mr. Ocampo's client's television stations and they say that we need to slaughter all the enemies of this militia, and if you don't join the militia you're going to be murdered and executed. So this is the type of people Mr. Ocampo has aligned himself with. From a corrupt UNocrat's perspective, you can understand why. He got a $3 million contract, $1 million a year plus $5,000 per day to serve this Libyan warlord client. In his defense, he said, oh, well, what he was doing was legal, and, I gave him important advice, like don't finance any crimes, right? I'll be happy to give you advice, don't finance any crimes. Will you give me $1 million plus $5,000 a day? I doubt it, right? Anybody could have given that advice. That's ludicrous. And so, it's just one representative example of the kind of corruption going on within this agency. Adding to that, so I am a big promoter of financial privacy. I'll just get that out of the way. I think everybody should be allowed to have secret bank accounts and offshore businesses and entities, and I don't think the government has any business knowing every detail of your financial life. In fact, the founders enshrined our rights to privacy in our houses, papers, effects, and all the rest of it right into the Constitution's Fourth Amendment, right into our Bill of Rights. And so I, like the Founding Fathers, I agree that people have a right to privacy. Mr. Ocampo and his little buddies at the United Nations and among the Dictators Club, the dictators and others who make up the United Nations, they disagree. They don't think you should have any financial privacy. But when it comes to their own affairs, then they want financial privacy. So as a result of these leaks, we now know that Mr. Ocampo had offshore accounts and entities in Belize, in Panama, in Uruguay, in the British Virgin Islands, right, where they can hide the ownership of the companies. And he was using these offshore entities to transfer money to himself, presumably from some of his mega wealthy warlord clients, funneling it through Switzerland and then to his bank account in the Netherlands. Isn't that nice? Wouldn't it be nice if we could all be, living at large like these UN people? So one of the things that infuriated me the most surrounding this character is a long story. The New American was one of the very few Western media outlets to get into the details of this. But back in 2011, I believe, there was an election in the Ivory Coast. As part of this election, there was, some dispute about the validity of the election and fraud, and it ended up going to the nation's Supreme Court. So there was a Christian candidate, President Gbagbo, I think is how you say his name, and then there was a Muslim central banker, globalist who had been working for IMF, World Bank, the whole constellation of globalist programs, and there was a dispute between them. And the Supreme Court decided that Gbagbo, the Christian president, had actually won the election, and so that would have been the end of the story, right? When our Supreme Court decided that Bush won the election, that was the end of the story. But not in the Ivory Coast. The UN decided that they know better than that nation and that nation's constitutional system, and so they sent warplanes and they backed this Islamic jihadist militia that butchered its way to the capital, massacring thousands and thousands of Christians with machetes. And under orders from this maniac Ocampo, they arrested the president, put him in jail 5 months before they even started an investigation into him, and replaced him with this Islamic candidate who, again, loyalty to the globalists, he promptly proceeded to shut shut down the free press, arrest all of his critics, kill some of his enemies, and all the rest of it. So that is the type of people we're dealing with here. Absolutely incredible. And meanwhile, you know, the UN pretends to be so concerned about human rights abuses. Well, let's look at the Ivory Coast. There was a survey done in a town in the Ivory Coast, and this was widely reported by the BBC and all the rest, a survey done by Save the Children in this little town. They interviewed the girls in this town. 8 out of 10, or 4 out of 5 of these underage girls said they were being regularly raped and sexually exploited by UN troops. Now, all of these UN troops are still running around. They have diplomatic immunity, they have impunity, they never face any consequences for any of this. And yet we have this UN Kangaroo court purporting to, you know, now they're literally talking about bringing Americans before this Kangaroo court, even though the United States never joined their silly Kangaroo court. The globalists want to use this court to become kind of the world court, right? And they've even been making noises about prosecuting American troops, and you've even had people saying they could prosecute American presidents, for crying out loud. So this is a disgrace. This court should be abolished. It should be investigated. The current chief prosecutor is trying to distance herself from the last chief prosecutor. She's an Islamist who literally was serving one of the most brutal dictators in the world before becoming the chief prosecutor for the ICC. So it's a sham all around, and stay tuned. There's a lot more documents to be released. There's going to be a lot more juicy stories here, and it just goes to show that when it comes to the UN, you can never trust the Dictators Club. It was founded by dictators, for dictatorial purposes. It needs to be shut down. I'm Alex Newman with The New American. Thanks again for watching, and check out the links below.